Hi, I'm Danny Gasparini, and welcome to Penn Voice. I have to say it's a bittersweet interview for me today, as I am saying goodbye to my long friend, Chief Susan Manheimer, who's been the police chief with the city of San Mateo for over 35 years. Chief Manheimer, you and I came into public service together. I think I was just newly elected to the Redwood City Council, and you were brought in as a police chief to San Mateo, which in and of itself was a huge boon for our San Mateo County, as you were the first female police chief in our county. So rather than you and I reminisce about the old days and how much fun we had back in the day, I want to give this time for you to talk about your career path and formally talk about what your next steps are.
Yes, so I just want to say, even though I was the first female police chief in this county, and I don't think they had any female above the rank of sergeant even at that time, I was welcomed with open arms. And there is such an incredible history of strong female leaders in this county. I mean, I could name a few, but then I'd forget so many that it was really quite supportive when I got down here. And all the male chiefs were proud of me and really embraced me. And this is such a great criminal justice county. So I have had just a blessed career here of support. So that's what I want to say first. And secondly, I think coming in, I was the fourth female police chief in the state of California. I always, Danny, just put my head down and wanted to do a really great job. Half because I was carrying the open door for other females and really to make sure that we were well respected and had confidence to do the job. But the other half was just because I love this profession. It's an honor to do it. It's a hard profession, and so you need to really be dedicated. So I never really wanted the focus on being a female, but I recognized as I got up that chain how important it was for women to see other women, for girls to see women in these leadership roles. So when I made chief, I made sure that we had a women leaders in law enforcement training, and throughout the state, over 1,000 women do that every year. And for our city, the city of San Mateo, there's been tremendous support, and I think pride in the fact that we had an early trailblazer. So I was in the first group of women throughout all ranks in San Francisco police. So imagine that, the first sergeants, the first detectives, the first lieutenants, and I always tried to stay very operational because I felt that I did need to really prove that we as trailblazers could do that, and then I knew the door would be open. And it has tremendously. We now have 28 female police chiefs in the state of California. We have over 14 or 15%, even in my department and others. And so it's really been lovely to kind of be on the leading edge, but not just as a female. I don't want to be remembered. I want to be remembered as a great chief who really brought in.
Well, and that's definitely seen in all of your policy and in all of your hiring policy too for people of color. So, and it's one of the other kinds of practices. We want to make sure that we're building diverse police forces, workforces, and that's one of the things that's been at the base of who you are. It's not about being a woman or a man. It's about making sure that your group is actually mirroring and represents your community. So that is people of color, gender aside. And I think we can all look at your track record and say, perhaps being that woman and coming through the ranks that perhaps you didn't have a lot of role models, you can also look forward and saying, we have to make sure that not only are women being promoted and are encouraged to engage in law enforcement, but also people of color, and that they're representing our communities and the ethnicities and the races and all the different kind of unique aspects of our community. So I thank you for that.
Yes, and reflecting our communities is so critically important because it's understanding our communities and it's being able to be there on the front lines. When I first came to San Mateo, I got onto the NAACP executive board because we needed to have those conversations. We needed to understand what the issues were and be on the front edges as leaders together and understand our communities through that. Because really, at the end of the day, it's about serving and understanding the priorities and needs of our communities. I came in, I wanted to chase bank robbers. I learned very early on the person in the Tenderloin who couldn't walk to the corner with their kid and wait for the bus cared more about getting the drug dealers out of the bus stop. So that's where that's what community policing is.
Right.
Community policing is understanding the priorities and culturally understanding the needs and how to interact with our communities.
Right, and you alluded to it briefly. Your history, you were in San Francisco prior to coming to San Mateo County. So you can imagine the differences in what community need and what community policing would be in a Tenderloin in San Francisco versus in San Mateo in various economic pockets of San Mateo and or throughout the different county. There are different needs, and you have to adjust to that.
That's right.
And it's just not one form of public safety. And I thought you've done a tremendous job at, taking what your training was in San Francisco and then bringing it to San Mateo County, where there are just different kinds of needs. The bank robber wasn't on every other corner. That really wasn't. But and I want to fast forward now, because you've been doing community policing for 3 decades and more. How has it changed for you from when you first got to San Mateo to today?
Yeah, I will say that I think the biggest change by far is that people's expectations are of responsiveness, and that has made us, not just police, but city and governmental services in general, much more responsive. So a community sort of gets the kind of policing they push for and ask for, and our city government, I think all over the county, is all about making sure we're serving those needs. But people are very busy, and they're transitory. They're not as many homeowners who have been here for 35, 40 years. And we have to reach them in different levels. So part of it is really getting out on Nextdoor and on the social media platforms. We have 25,000 different disparate followers on social media, because now more than ever, that communication is quick. People don't have time to come to a late night meeting. They really want that information on the run, and they really want to have different arenas through which to communicate with us. So we are really trying, and any example of either a man-made disaster or some kind of a fire or whatever it is, it all comes down to, at the end, how in touch we are with our community, how quickly we can communicate, and how quickly we can provide the critical information needed. So we've really, really turned around. We have a public information officer. We have a social media officer. Most of us as chiefs are on Twitter now. And we found, frankly, even with the Boston bombing or what happened in Gilroy, that they look to our Twitter accounts to get that firsthand information, because even going through the media becomes second and third steps. So we've really had to become very communicative along different media.
Well, and I think we can both agree that technology has changed the way in which we investigate crime as well. I mean, we are all sad to see the shooting happen in Gilroy, and one of the ways in which they were investigating if or not there was a second shooter was to jump on the original shooter's Twitter page and Facebook page to see who, in fact, he was communicating to. So technology has proven to be a very valuable tool with regard to communication and investigation. So in addition to technology and the way that's changed community policing, I see our officers really involved in complex social issues. How has that changed and evolved with regard to training officers and what your job is today versus what you were doing 35 years ago?
I will tell you that is probably the single most important and gratifying piece of what we're doing. Danny, we are the only ones as police who make house calls. You call 911 or the ambulance. It's one of the two, because we are the ones in the trenches. But what do we have? We have the tools of force and the tools, we have handcuffs, but we don't have so much of what the need is out there. Homelessness is not a crime, yet we're the ones to respond if there are issues. Juvenile delinquency and bullying, really at the end of the day, they're cries for help. Handcuffs are never the best first answer in a young person's cry for help. I could go on, even immigration issues, which get caught up in sort of policy that is so unsettled now that really when we come to a scene, and it's generally one of the most traumatic parts of a person's life, whether you're a victim, a suspect, or a witness. It's a trauma. We have to bring the kinds of services and the kinds of training that are trauma-informed enough to try and go past handcuffs and that revolving door of criminal justice to get the help they need that is not there in the house call. So we're doing mental health training throughout the entire county now. On de-escalation, we have 40 hours of mental health crisis interference and response training that every officer is committed to go through in this county because the chiefs have said we need that for them. And so we have a homeless outreach team, which actually we were able to pioneer through the city of San Mateo and now goes through the whole county. It's record-breaking, but it makes sense. We partner the officer with the social services worker, with the shelter network, and all the other services that have put the position for the person there, and then we bring those services and start to unpeel the layers. Because, you know, the bottom line is we don't want these tools around here to respond to non-criminal issues, but we have to be the resource broker to get them to those services. And this county is great at that.
And one of the things that's always hitting the news media now is de-escalation. So an officer reports to a scene and they're trying to assess something in 15 seconds. As to whether it's going to lead to violence or whether it's something that can be subdued with words, you know, contained quite easily, and resources were good to go at the end of the day. Or is this going to turn into something a little bit more violent? So we're asking our officers to make very split-second decisions, and you're talking about the trainings that they're now getting that help with determine and assess these situations. We often see in media all of the bad points of de-escalation. We saw all of the conversation around tasers. Tell us how a police officer sort of navigates this whole idea of de-escalation and that split-second decision that they're making about how you do take a mental health individual and know it's mental health versus drug overdose that may lead to violence, or how do they get that training to understand where that comes from?
It's funny, we've always said in policing, I have to be the doctor, the lawyer, the social worker, the parent, all of the different social networks that may have failed this individual. But at the end of the day, there are new best practices and training that will give us so much more what we call trauma-informed response, and even just knowing where those services are to get them to. But in that split second, there are so many judgments that need to go through an individual officer's head that we want to give them the matrix. So we do the 40 hours of crisis de-escalation, mental health training. We do the awareness about the drug addiction and where they may need and what they may need. We even carry Narcan now, should there be what may be a fatal overdose, so we can immediately intervene. So we're asking so much more of them, but in a way, we're doing it smarter so that we can give them those tools up front. Even body-worn cameras have taken, everyone behaves better on camera. And so we see the whole side of the story. We're able to debrief and learn from these situations. There's no manual for how to respond to the myriad. I mean, I am 35 years in policing. I still see a different situation every day. So what we need to do really is load them with the services and the training, and then really work through these situations and learn from each of them. And we as a county have been doing that well together, but really partnering with these different services that can help us out on the streets. I don't have houses to give people who are homeless. I don't even have vouchers, but that homeless outreach team worker does. And so when they go on the beat with the cops throughout this county, we're getting those resources to the folks. So the last thing I want to say is there's no one silver bullet. Tasers are not the answer for everything, but they're certainly an important tool. Body-worn cameras are not the answer for everything, but all of these combined get to our troops to make them the most informed, aware, developed, and trained officers for the myriad of societal dysfunction that they see out there that don't necessarily benefit from the handcuffs.
I hope our viewers are sort of understanding, and I think we all do, the complexity of what public safety is today. Because, you know, as perhaps some of our community resources are diminishing, we don't have as many homeless facilities and shelters. As our drug addiction becomes more complex, we all know what's happening on the oxycodone side. As you know, our mental health programs may be faltering, or maybe not as many people are getting into them because we're not identifying them earlier. Your officers, our officers, are seeing these individuals.
Yes.
And so the complexity is not only are they trying to de-escalate a situation, but there's a whole community around it that's going to be affected by that one incident too, that we have to make sure that everybody understands the trauma, the drama, all the things that went into that individual's homelessness or drug addiction.
And when you think about in those microseconds that an officer makes that decision and how it will be judged and seen from 12 cell phone videos, from the body-worn camera, from all these different, and really looked at for years sometimes in courts of law and other places, that's a tremendous onus to put on officers. And believe me, they want to get it right out there.
Right.
But there are times that we must use force to protect society and sometimes people from themselves.
Right.
And those are the times in which we want as many tools as we can use,
Right.
as much training. We have a new simulator called Multi-Force Options.
Right.
That it's the old shoot, don't shoot.
Right.
We actually do it in arcades sometimes. But we love to put media and community members, we're putting our city council through it, so that they can understand some of what goes into these split-second decisions.
Right.
But here's what's really exciting about it. It used to be shoot, don't shoot, and I cringe at that title because, Danny, we have so many more options, from less lethal options to bringing in a de-escalation crisis-informed officer, that now we are actually training to those scenarios so that we are giving more options out in the field when it comes to that single decision that will impact so many.
Right.
So we're really getting incredible amount of training out there.
Right. And I liken it to just like we made decision a decade ago to put medics on fire trucks. We're now making the decision to put these de-escalation officers who really understand the social impacts of society onto your police forces, and they're part of your team when they're going out to
And can I
identify.
go one step
Yes.
further with that? Because the sad reality today is that we're seeing active shooter situations.
Right.
And we've seen several here locally that
Right.
have really come home to roost. And what we've done to take it a step further, and I think we're always somehow on the leading edge here in San Mateo County, and I liken that to the fact that we as a whole county, not just the police side, but all of criminal justice and social services work together. We are now putting medics in with our SWAT team response, because the SWAT team has to go to the threat. The active shooter, as you saw in Gilroy, saved so many lives from going right to the threat. But what happens is there are others who require medical attention. We are bringing in that medical attention at the same time
At the scene.
we're going to the threat. So say in Tanforan, other civilians were wounded, you know, and we would have that with the SWAT response right there. So we are really, really responding quickly and making changes and being on the leading edge of how to best protect and serve that community and do it in a way that's the least harm.
So we have just a few minutes left, so I want to talk about legacy. What's, and this is going to be the toughest question you have, but it's one I'm sure other people are going to ask you.
Yeah.
And that is, what's your legacy? What's that moment or that policy or that place and time where you can say, I was a part of that?
I mean, I think there's 2 or 3 things that if I look at programs or initiatives that we instituted in the city of San Mateo that are now countywide, I think the homeless outreach team would be one, because I learned from my days on the beat and the Tenderloin, that person laying on the corner could be a wounded Vietnam vet who never got what he needed, you know, a Purple Heart vet. And we need to make sure that we bring the services to them. And we have been so effective in that. And this entire county has embraced that, where I never could quite do that in the Tenderloin with the great need. Here we have done it. But if there's one thing in my career, it's always been about the youth. Because the youth are the ones who are our future, our workforce. And no one wakes up robbing a bank, Danny. They wake up, they call for help, they're young, they don't get what they need. And if there's a way, we know each juvenile that ends up in juvenile hall, and I love Chief Keen, and we're doing great things, has 7 times more likely to end up and graduate to the big house in adult prison. So if we can, with our diversion program that Chief Keen and the county manager and the Board of Soups have all supported with services and probation officers, we are pre-arrest diverting these kids out so they never land with an arrest record. They never get to the hall. We have our PAL and our school resource. That, to me, is where you get them out of the system, on track, in school, out of jail. That's our future, and that's where we have the most impact. And to me, that's been my career.
Well, and we're going to end on this. Your last days with us are going to be in December.
Yes, so I have a lot of time left.
So you have a few
No
months
goodbyes.
left. And here's the thing that you're going to have to promise me, because our friendship goes well beyond this table. And that is, you're going to have to come back before you retire and tell us what your next journey is going to be.
Okay, so I have to say it here first.
Well, I know you have time to think about it, and there are so many things that I think people are going to be saying, come on, Susan, you need to be a part of this, and we certainly respect that you're now going to have time for your grandkids and your family.
That's right, my family.
And all of those kinds of great things, but we're going to be pushing you to continue your leadership role in law enforcement and keeping our communities safe. So you're going to have to promise me an interview in November or December.
As long as you listen to me and all the other great things we're doing.
All right, you got a deal.
Okay.
Well, Susan, I don't know whether to cry or give you a hug, but I think I'm going to give you a hug and say thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, and for all of what you do to bring so much to our county. So thank you.
Again, thanks, Susan. Chief Susan Manheimer, who's going to be retiring at the end of December of this year. Well documented career, legacy, and a good friend for life. We'll see all of you next time on Penn Voice.